Hello, my name is Ellie Gettinger. I am the education director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee. I'm going to give this a second or two for anybody who's joining us right now to jump on. I hope you're doing all right today. This is our second installment of our Holocaust week of around sharing stories through museum moments. And today we are going to be exploring one of the most fascinating stories that I get to share in the museum, the story of the Magda Watts dolls. And I see Robin Cohen is here. Welcome. Robin, I've spent some time today with this story and I have some edits to add. I listened to an oral history I hadn't heard before. I've done a little bit of deeper digging. And I think one of the things that might come out of Corona quarantine is that we might change the way we tell the story of the Magda Watts dolls, which is kind of a fascinating thing that in museums, we have to constantly evolve and change and edit. And as new information comes to light, we have to figure out how to engage that information, how to engage students with that information. With that said, we're going to be exploring these dolls, but before I show them to you, I just want to give you a sense of how they're used in the museum and how we got these pieces. First, this was not part of the original design of the museum. About 2 years after we opened, or maybe a year, we received a fabulous gift from the Commissar family. And they had seen, the Commissar family owns Built Right Furniture. They're a lovely local business. It's fourth generation family owned, and it's fabulous. And they had seen this piece in a gallery in Israel. And actually, Maureen Commissar had many pieces by this artist. I feel like a number of these family members had already been inspired by her work. And they saw this large scale diorama of an experience in Auschwitz, and they were struck by it. It's not the sort of thing you'd want in your home, but it's the sort of thing that you see and you're so emotionally hit by that you're like, what can we do with it? And they saw it and they felt like it needed to be part of the new Jewish museum in Milwaukee. So they bought it for us and they shipped it to us. And of course, in transit from Israel to Milwaukee, it got a little broken. We had to have a doll specialist come in from Chicago to fix it up. And our first inclination is this might be too dark for us to have on permanent display in the museum. So when we built a case for it, we built it on wheels with the assumption that we might move it in and out. And what we found very shortly after unveiling it is that this became such a touchstone, such a way for all of our student groups to understand the Holocaust, such a way to understand survival, to understand response, to understand how this impacted children, that it needed to always be in there. And it always has been since it was unveiled in, I believe, 2009. So today we're going to share the story of these dolls. Now, when I talk about Magda Watts, Magda was born in a village outside of Budapest. I think it's about 45 kilometers outside of Budapest. It's a small town. She was the youngest of 6 children. And she had this large family. She was fairly religious. They all had this, very insular, very close life together. And generally when you see her pieces, they seem a little bit more kind of whimsical, light. This is one of her and her friends, I believe. Magda had red hair, playing cards, and it seems like it could be any 3 grannies that on their bridge day. And many of her pieces have this kind of feel of a modern grouping of people. And many of them look at what life was like in Budapest in Hungary before the war. But every so often she gets into her experience of the Holocaust. And today we are going to explore that in particular. This is the image that we have in our museum. It is a fascinating piece. It is large. It's about 2 feet wide and maybe 2.5 feet wide, 1.5 feet tall. And the images, and I'll get you some close-up looks at them a little bit later, are all carved faces. The bodies are kind of a paper mache-like feel. You can see that it's handmade. There are many objects in here that are everyday sorts of objects. And this reflects Magda's family's experience in the Holocaust. This piece is hard to look at. And it's where when I have a student group, I have them sit down in front of it and they all look at it together and they're all sharing this piece together. It's where we talk about what they've learned about the Holocaust to this point and how this can reflect on a bigger vision. So Magda, as I said, was 15 when she was deported from her village to Auschwitz. And she was in a family of 8. One of her sisters was immediately sent to a slave labor camp before any of these the deportation to Auschwitz happened. She and her mother and an older sister and 2 of her older sisters were all together. And in the end, she ended up being with one older sister. Her mother and the other older sister were sent to the gas chambers when they got there. Her 2 brothers and her father were separated, and she actually didn't see them. One of the brothers and her father, again, they died the day before the war ended and the day after the war ended, or the day after liberation. But one brother she did reconnect with after the war. So, I mean, out of this very large family, they had some survival, but it was pretty decimated. So Magda is in Auschwitz. And the way I've always told this is that she was sick and that she wasn't doing so well. But in listening to her oral history today, it's actually that her sister was quite ailing. And it felt like it was her responsibility to take care of her sister. She described this, and I thought this was really beautiful, that her sister was her mind. She was the one who was saying, when we're free, this is what's going to happen. When this happens, and she was giving them kind of a spiritual sense of purpose. And Magda became the body for both of them, where she would find food and try and share that with her sister. One late evening, 7 months after they arrived in Auschwitz, there was a gentleman who was doing a selection for Siemens, the large multinational organization that I'm sure you've heard of. And they needed 250 girls. And she ran back and she got her sister and hid her under a blanket. And they both got into this transport to the Siemens factory. And that's really the big difference, that it wasn't Magda who was sick. It was her sister, and she protected and saved her sister. Later, at this work camp in Germany, at the Siemens camp, she gets scabies. And she is itchy. It is terrible. And they send her to the barrack so that she does not infect other people, that she stays separate from people. And in that barrack, she crafts a doll for herself out of the things she finds, including her uniform. She takes a piece off of her uniform and she crafts this doll for herself. And when the person who's bringing food comes in, and granted they are on, starvation level rations, they are not getting much food. When this girl comes in, she says, let me show you, give me some food for my baby. And the girl is taken by this baby. She says, ooh, I want that baby. She says, no, you can't have this baby, but I'll make you another one. And this girl was from Holland, so she makes her a Dutch-inspired doll with a windmill and all of these other things, and gives her a little bit more food. And from there, someone who's over that girl sees this doll and then orders another doll, a Polish doll. And from there, that person, I think she had a lover who wanted a Japanese doll or something. And they come up with this whole list of orders for her to, at the end, that she is having 3 other girls who are working for her to make dolls for the people who want dolls. They're giving her the materials and they're giving her enough food to support herself. These dolls were her means of survival. As the war is coming to a close, the Germans start moving these girls who had been working in this factory all over to try and reduce the understanding of where they are, so that people don't know who they are. They don't see the evidence of the atrocity. And Magda ends up in Czechoslovakia at the end of the war. And from there, she and her sister, who she survived with, they go back to Hungary. But she feels so at sea in Hungary. She is so lost there. She couldn't possibly stay there. So she convinces a group of men who are sneaking out, who are escaping from Hungary, to take her with them when she goes to, and they go to Palestine, where she becomes an Israeli. And she goes about her life, and she goes about the business of living, and she builds a family. She gets married. She does all of those things until she goes back in the 1980s to see her village in Hungary. And so many of the places she remembered from her childhood don't exist anymore. So as I said, she starts recreating those scenes in doll form. And every so often she comes back to it and she explores her family's experience in the Holocaust in doll form. So that's what we feel so privileged about being able to share. I'm going to show you some close-up examples. I really want you to pay attention to how she uses kind of everyday objects. So this is just giving you a sense of these faces. Each one is different. It's my understanding that within this piece, each person, there are 15 people in this piece, that each one represents a different member of her family who was killed in Auschwitz. And, you know, she talks about how that there were so many people who were lost there and how they were just decimated and how horrible this is. And I think she really captures that sense of the horror in their faces. She uses kind of everyday objects, as I was saying. And this one shows you that the electrified fence is our push pins. You know, they're sharp. Also, these silver things that you're looking at right over the halt stop sign, those are actually whistles. So she's making her alarms whistles. And again, you get the sense of the hunger, the sorrow, the sadness, the overwhelming anxiety. All of that stuff is at play here. The symbol that I always find the most interesting is if you look at the front gates, right under where it says Magda, you can see a little bit of a notch there. And she's made the literal gates of her Auschwitz oven racks. And it's an incredibly stark image. It's incredibly hard, you know, as you start thinking about that. She talks about going to the gas chambers and people being sent to crematoria. And she's making her literal gates oven racks to say, this is what happened to my family, to my people in this place. And it does give you that kind of visceral response. You feel incredibly emotional about it. This is a portrait, a very small picture, I didn't realize how tiny it was, of Magda later in life. And she, and I actually just learned she died last year in March. So she had a very long life and a very lengthy set of impacts on the world, in which her dolls are literally in museums all over the world and collectors have these all over. So when she said in an interview I read from 1990 that when I die, I won't really die because pieces of me are all over the world and that I've shared my memory of the Holocaust. And so I feel privileged that I get to continue sharing her story, sharing her memories, and being part of this continuum of Holocaust remembrance through Magda Watts sculptures. Thank you so much for joining us today at this museum moment. Tomorrow, we're exploring another Hungarian story, the story of Eva Zaret. Eva came to Milwaukee, and we're going to share the pieces that she has in the museum. I'm really excited about that. If you've enjoyed this museum moment or any of our virtual content, please feel free to make us a donation. We always appreciate it. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.